Our reading from the Bible today is a story from the life of Jesus that you may not know. It seems that after Jesus became very well known in the area where he grew up, not everybody knew how to handle his fame, including his family. Listen to this story about the people who knew Jesus the best, coming to terms with who he was becoming. Then he went home, and the crowd came together again, so that they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for people were saying, "He has gone out of his mind." Then his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you." And he replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Laura. In addition to the accoutrements of worship provided by God and the Davidson College grounds crew, you'll notice that we also have a few arrangements up front that are from a wedding yesterday. We were blessed to celebrate the wedding of Becca Justice, the daughter of Steve and Phyllis Justice, to Russell Holden, and we offer our blessing upon them on this journey of husband and wife. Among the first few times that I made a public departure from my parents, a break from the way that I had been brought up, it was sometime in high school. I'm not talking about when I got my ear pierced for the first time. I got it twice. And I'm not talking about joining another religion. It had to do with, of all things, meat. Many of you know that my wife, Sean Samuelson Henry, and I are vegetarians. But as a Gen X Midwestern kid, in addition to growing up with dangerous merry-go-rounds and hot metal slides and other dubious playground implements that combined with incessant tackling games made recess a lot like the Hunger Games, I also grew up eating meat. At our house, seafood was the Gorton Fisherman or Mrs. Paul's Fish Sticks. In red meat, it was always New York strip, always well done, and usually with a healthy dose of A1 steak sauce. So after a trip out east with my Uncle David and my Aunt Terry, where my uncle, my mother's brother, ordered a filet mignon medium rare for me, I came home to Wheaton, Illinois, and out for dinner one night with my family, I ordered a filet mignon medium rare in front of my parents. I don't know if I would label it as significant as crossing the Rubicon, but it was new territory for me. I did not look up at my parents until everyone was done ordering. I'd made a trip to the bathroom to catch my breath. I had made a public departure from one of the ways that I was raised in front of the people who had raised me. For those of you who are a little older, what was one of the first times you made a break from your parents, from your family of origin? For some, it was probably not as big a deal as it felt, a la my filet mignon. But for others, perhaps for you, it was of a higher order. Maybe you joined a different political party than your parents. Maybe you joined another religious tradition. For still others, it might have been something even more painful. What was one of the first times that you self-differentiated? After all, we all have, those of us who are beyond adolescence, it's our lifelong project to become ourselves and not the people that the families who raise us imagine we should be. As one older, wiser soul once told me, "Peter, we help our children learn to walk so that they will walk with us and someday walk away from us." So what was your first time? My hope is that it was not like a family that I met at a different church where the son returned to town after his father's death, and while planning for the funeral, he told me we never really forgave each other for positions we took and things we said during the Vietnam War. I had to be right, and so did he, and our relationship never recovered. Our reading from Mark today is certainly not the first instance that Jesus takes a step away from those who knew him when. Not only is he 30 years old in this story, we also know that as a 12-year-old, when the family started the road trip north, Jesus stayed in Jerusalem in the temple. So our reading for today is not the first time Jesus says, I'm heading out into new territory, but it certainly caught Mark's attention, and it always catches mine. Because so often when we think of Jesus, we know that religious leaders did not like what he taught. We know the political leaders did not like the fervor that he seemed to stir up, but his family, his neighbors, come on, of course they loved everything about the hometown boy, now famous, coming back to be with them. But Mark says he went home. And the crowd came together. And when his family heard it, they went out to restrain Jesus. For people were saying he has gone out of his mind. Okay. His ministries led him down a path that was different than theirs, but surely when they go to talk to him about his choices, communicate ways in which they're worried about things he's said and done, surely Jesus will listen then. But Mark continues. His mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him, they called him. A crowd was sitting around him. They said to him, your mother, your brothers, your sisters are outside. They're asking for you. And Jesus replied, who are my mother and my brothers? Whoever does the will of God is my mother and my sister and my brother. Ouch. Who are my mother and brothers? When Jesus grows up, apparently he adopts a new family, or at least expands his understanding of family, which is not a problem. Adoptive parents and adoptive children know all about having new families. And many of our siblings in the LGBTQ community know about the importance of found family and the families we choose, because still so often their families don't welcome who they are when they have grown up enough to share their gender, their identity, or their orientation with their families or with their churches, which is why I love the story of Tennessee father Dan Blevins, who garnered national attention the other year in a TikTok video where he offered to be a stand-in father at gay weddings. He said, if you're a same-sex couple that's getting married, and you do not have biological parents there to support you, please let me know. If I'm not able to attend your wedding, I have friends that will. We have a big network, and it just continues to grow, of moms and dads that will be part of your big day. Yes, we can find or expand our families when we grow up, even if it is painful, like Jesus when he grows up. For some of us, Jesus grows up again and again, or I should say our conceptions of him grow up again and again as we grow up. And sometimes that leads us to new places in our faith, which, like self-differentiating in other parts of life, is totally natural. Remember the Apostle Paul? He wrote in 1 Corinthians, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we shall see face to face. Put differently, practical theologian James Fowler argues that most adults in American churches find themselves in a state of stasis, midway between 6 stages of faith development. And at this midpoint stage, most of us mirror or conform to the values and beliefs of our communities. But for individuals to grow in faith, Fowler writes, they must, quote, encounter experiences or perspectives that lead to critical reflection on how their beliefs have changed and formed. As one theologian summed up Fowler, she wrote, we need to leave home physically, psychologically, spiritually to encounter people and perspectives that are different than those we've always known. This is what happens when Jesus grows up. or at least when our conceptions of him do. A moment ago, I referenced the Apostle Paul writing about maturing in faith, but I didn't read the rest of that passage. In the rest of the passage, Paul tells us how to know when our faith has matured, when we left home, as Fowler says, when we've grown up with Jesus. Paul writes, "Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love." Love is the foundation, it is the hallmark, it is the beginning, and it is the end, and it is the entirety of a mature faith. For it is Jesus who sums up the law and commandments: love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. It is Jesus who says, love one another as I have loved you. It is the scriptures that say, beloved, let us love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God, for God is love. Those who abide in love abide in God. God abides in them. The church, you, me, our faith grows up when we grow in love. Now, it is often the case that preachers need to channel Paul Harvey and tell the rest of the story with passages like those from Corinthians and Mark today. Because yes, Jesus gives his family a bit of a verbal and emotional stiff arm. We can argue that the definition of family can and does include his biological family, but well, I'm not sure they heard that when they were called out in front of the crowd. But the rest of the story is that at the foot of the cross, his mother Mary was there, a disciple of her son, the Savior. And the rest of the story is that one of his brothers, James, went on to be the leader of the Jerusalem church. James the Just, he was called. In some ways, more famous than Jesus at the time that he lived. Famous because he lived the teaching of his brother Jesus. The rest of the story is that when Jesus grows up, or at least our conceptions of him, we grow up too. We grow up and we grow together when there is love. May it be so for us now and forever.